Hello and welcome to another episode of the Safe Schools Rainbow Roundtable. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Sheridan. This is one of America's most important television programs that explores the LGBTQ+ experience for our students and youth, educators, and families. Our mission is to educate our communities on some of the biggest issues our queer youth face. Today, we delve into a theme that holds immense significance in our educational landscape, LGBTQ+ History Month, celebrated every October. We have an incredible panel with us today, each bringing their unique perspective and expertise on the topic. They'll be sharing insights on why it's crucial for students to learn about LGBTQ+ heroes and the importance of seeing themselves reflected in history. But before we hear from them, let's set the stage. In examining LGBTQ+ history and its impact on today's education, we will have an historical overview that will take us on a journey through time. LGBTQ+ History Month is not just a month, it's a testament to the resilience, struggles, and triumphs of a community that has often been marginalized. Throughout history, there have been key events, landmark decisions, and influential figures that have shaped the narrative of LGBTQ+ rights and representation. Today, we'll journey through some of these pivotal moments to understand the roots of this commemorative month and its relevance in our schools. We will consider real-life experiences. History is not just about dates and events. It's about the people who lived through those times, their stories, their challenges, and their victories. In this segment, we'll hear real-life experiences that highlight the profound impact of LGBTQ+ History Month. From students who found solace in learning about LGBTQ+ heroes, to teachers who've witnessed the transformative power of inclusive education. These stories will shed light on why it's essential to recognize and celebrate this month. As we transition to our discussion on tools and resources available, remember that knowledge is power. With the right tools and resources, we can ensure that every student feels seen and valued. In this segment, we'll explore the myriad of tools, strategies, and educational materials available for educators and students alike. Whether you're a teacher looking to diversify your curriculum, or a student seeking resources to understand your identity better, this segment aims to empower you with actionable knowledge. And lastly, we'll gaze into the horizon with our Future Outlook segment. As we look to the future, it's essential to recognize the strides we've made and the challenges that lie ahead. What does the future hold for LGBTQ+ History Month? How can we, as a collective educational community, ensure that the stories of LGBTQ+ heroes continue to inspire and resonate with future generations? Our panelists will share their insights on these questions and more, providing a roadmap for a more inclusive and understanding future. We thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey today. Before we dive deeper into our discussions, we have an amazing group of panelists to discuss our LGBTQ+ history and its impact on today's education. To help us with the history of LGBTQ+, this is Steve Rothaus. This award-winning journalist for the Miami Herald is a recipient of the NLGJA, the Association of LGBTQ+ Journalists Hall of Fame Award. Welcome, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much. It's kind of interesting to me that when I started covering LGBTQ+ issues back in 1997, I didn't think of it at the time as chronicling our history. I mean, I was just covering stories on a daily basis, but then suddenly people in the community began to say, you're telling our stories and, you're keeping our history. And all these years later, I look at my work and I see going back to 1997, 98, and moments in history of our history. I started because Johnny Versace was murdered in Miami Beach in 1997, and nobody in Miami could cover the LGBTQ community that was so involved in the story. And so that's a moment in history. Mm-hmm. And then within a year, the loss of Matthew Shepard, and writing about what young people here thought about that. And then you take it right through to marriage in 2013, 2014, 2015, and these are all moments in our history that, it's there, it's kept, it's in an archive, you can go to the library and read these stories. But my concern is that, people don't remember, that they don't really know, or they were born afterwards.
Sure. Well, we look forward to hearing what you have to say today. Thank you,
Thanks.
Steve. To help us with the digital and pop culture understanding of LGBTQ plus history, this is Tiffany Williams, a popular digital influencer and host of Tiffany Explains It All. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you for having me here. I think it's really interesting to be kind of like the social media guru, so to say, because a lot of my audience is usually younger generation, teenagers, even some young adults, and occasionally, some adults that are young at heart, And I think the most important thing is to have some representation for the LGBTQ plus students, because there's a lot more of them than people like to point out. So, and their matters are so important, and just being able to be the voice for them is such an amazing experience to be doing.
Absolutely. We'll hear a little bit more about Tiffany Explains It All later.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And to help us with this academic perspective on the intersection of LGBTQ plus history and education, this is Dr. Gisela Vega, the director of the University of Miami LGBTQ plus Student Center, one of America's most important university programs for LGBTQ plus students. Welcome, Dr. Vega.
Thank you, Dan. It's really great to be here. The center is part of the university, and we have actually one of the only LGBTQ minors that you'll find in Florida. I think something that's really interesting is about our queer theory. Queer theory is a camp of research and study,
Yes.
and it's been around for a long time. And folks think our history has just started, but the reality is our history has been around forever. And our very first program, I think, started back in 1971. Mm-hmm. So, there's definitely a long legacy there that we hope isn't forgotten and that people can learn more about.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Vega.
Sure.
And to help us with the student perspective on LGBTQ plus history and how it interacts in classrooms and on student campuses, this is Artemis Cruz, a student in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. Welcome, Artemis.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk and learn about professional perspective and everything. Thank you.
Thank you. And we look forward to hearing the student perspective too.
Thank you.
And to help us with the organization efforts going on over LGBTQ plus history and how it affects education, this is Harold Marrero, Chief Operating Officer of Safe Schools. Welcome, Harold.
Thank you for having me. And everybody here is sharing a great perspective. Queer history is something that is often not really spoken about, or when it's spoken about is concentrated just to recent history. And there's so much more that can be explored across not just the West, but across the entire globe. And we're trying to do that at Safe Schools. We've just launched a new program called Queer History 101, where we do these short videos and we just expand on different perspectives on queer history. And we plan to expand that throughout the years. So this is right on topic for us.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. So thank you for setting the stage with us. As we delve deeper into our theme, let's journey back in time and explore the historical context that has shaped today's LGBTQ plus landscape. Let's consider the historical overview. As we embark on a historical overview, it's essential to understand the roots and significance of LGBTQ plus History Month. This month-long celebration is not just a nod to the past, but a testament to the resilience, struggles, and triumphs of the diverse and beautiful lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer communities. The inception of LGBTQ plus History Month can be traced back to 1994, thanks to Rodney Wilson, a history teacher from Missouri. Recognizing the importance of highlighting the LGBTQ plus community's history and civil rights movements, Rodney took the initiative to create this observance. By the following year, the National Education Association's General Assembly had added LGBTQ plus History Month to its list of commemorative months. But why October? Well, October was chosen for its significance in the LGBTQ plus community. National Coming Out Day was already observed on October 11th, and the first March for Gay Rights in Washington took place on October 14th, 1979. As the years have passed, the month has grown to encompass more than just history. It now includes Ally Week, a time where students are encouraged to stand in solidarity with their LGBTQ plus peers and combat bullying. Spirit Day, observed on October 20th, sees people donning the color purple in a show of support for LGBTQ plus youth. And we also remember Matthew Shepard, a young man whose life was tragically cut short in a hate crime on October 12, 1998. The beauty of the LGBTQ plus History Month is that it offers a chance to delve deep into the movement's history, understanding the factors that have been successful in building communities and spotlighting role models who best represent and address the issues of the LGBTQ plus community. While most prominently celebrated in countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Hungary, Brazil, and the city of Berlin, the month observance varies. For instance, while we celebrate in October here in the US, our friends in the UK and Hungary observe it in February. Berlin, on the other hand, celebrates Queer History Month in June. Panelists, considering the rich tapestry of events and figures that have shaped the LGBTQ plus movement, what do you believe is the most pivotal moment or figure in LGBTQ plus history that has had a lasting impact on today's generation?
Well, I when I saw this question, I thought about it, and it's, to me, something that I can't answer specifically with one person or one event, because for each generation, they have an event or a person or people who they relate to and remember, and it moved them. And, this is not just LGBTQ history, but this is, most history, how perhaps 9/11 moved a generation, and perhaps a generation before was Challenger, the explosion. Or generations before that, it may have been the Vietnam War or the Kennedy assassination. You keep going back and you talk to, now to the people who are gone, and we spoke about what moved them, and it was Pearl Harbor. Mm-hmm. So, there are moments in our history that I see that affect us all, and that they affect generations after generation. But, how you compare a Matthew Shepard to, marriage equality. I mean, it's just, or, a Jazz Jennings and what jazz has been able to do in our community. They're all important, and they take particular significance to certain individuals. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, that we need to be able to broaden and reach, people. First, remind them of what is important to them, but then educate them about what they should also know.
Yeah, that's a very great, perspective, and I also think that the question was open-ended in this terms of people share their person. Or people that has made an impact to them when it comes to history. And as I was thinking about it, I'm very happy that the academics and educators have gone into the history, have gone back in time and tried to pluck the different LGBTQ or queer voices that existed. Because for me personally, and I've had this for a long time, my queer heroes are Saint Sergius and Bacchus, and they're celebrated in the Greek Orthodox Church, and there are two Christian martyrs who were killed by Rome. And they were an example of the first same-sex couple that is celebrated as saints. And there were two guys that were in the military, and I just love their story. So for me, my queer heroes are from the Roman Empire and from the early early church movement that emerged during that time, during the 1st and 2nd century. And that's just my perspective, And then what I've seen is that history tends to go silent all the way up to the 1900s. And then you have some people in the 1800s, but it's mainly in the 1900s. And then in recent histories, when we have all this explosion of queer history, but we have existed throughout the entire time that humanity has even, picked up a tool and started writing.
You bring up a good point, Harold. The history didn't start, in the 1900s. And unfortunately, I think in this country, we think it started with Stonewall, and we know that there were many movements before then. The first LGBT organization that came together, in our history was actually in 1924. So there's definitely a lot of history This is why it's important for us to be able to share that history, because if not, it's forgotten. But historically, there have been figures throughout time. You know, we can go back to the island of Lesbos and talk about Sappho, who was a Greek writer, a female writer, who much of her writings were destroyed because she wrote about love between women. So I think, yes, there's a lot of different icons throughout time, and there's a lot of history, and unfortunately, a lot of it is either, you know, not spoken, not shared, or forgotten.
I definitely want to like just pivot off of what all you've been saying, because I definitely agree with you with your opening statement. That's like, the question is almost kind of like, well, like, where do you even start? Like, there's just so many different people, and like the LGBTQ plus is like, there's so much of us, and we're all different segments. So it's like, there's so many different people in history. And yes, I do agree. I think a lot of younger generation right now, when they think about queer history, they think about the Stonewall riots, you know, and I think they don't know enough to know that there was more beyond that. Again, I've seen photographs from like the 1920s and I think the 1910s of men being with men and women being with women. I'm sorry, but nobody talked about it. That's the thing. And when you find those little like tidbits, those little like pieces of like history, and that's essentially what it is. It's history. I think it's so beautiful, because then you're like, oh wow, so this has been going on since the beginning of time, since man was able to do things, you know. And even when you were talking about Sappho, which we get sapphic poetry is women on women love. And I think that's something that like not a lot of people would know that. And especially, it's so interesting. It's like it's something that's been around since time itself. And then that there was just at one point that all of a sudden people were like, well, this is too much. This is too progressive. This is, we need to not talk about this. This is too much. And so it's like, but then you have all these new generations that they feel kind of conflicted with their queerness. Because then they're like, maybe there's something wrong with me. It's like, no, like what you're experiencing is just normal.
Yeah.
So I think we're starting to get to that point of like, it's okay to be queer. Like you are just the way you are supposed to be, and there's nothing wrong with that. So,
You know,
Sorry, I was just going to share something that I think is really interesting is when we talk about Stonewall, we talk about the intersections of our community and how it showed up at Stonewall, not realizing that we had a whole community during the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s and 30s that really highlighted our Black community and was really recognized and acknowledged, and people were respected for the music they chose to write and the people they chose to love. So it's an interesting observation.
And going back a little bit, but a bit back in history, it is also known that before the arrival of Columbus in America, within indigenous communities all around the Americas, queer people were celebrated. It would be good luck to have a queer person in your life. And I've heard it a lot, is that the heteronormative is a colonial construct, which it is, it really is, because you see a lot of cultures that throughout history, not only in America, have celebrated queer people in general.
Yeah. And that extends also to, the impact of colonialism in the world is that Christianity became the lens which colonialism was in place on top of these cultures. And in many Asian countries that had contact with colonialism, the Catholic Church at that time, or the Roman Catholic Church at that time, tried heavily to erase the same gender love that existed in some of these Asian communities and these Asian cultures. And there, you talked about that it was too progressive, so people try to erase it. It's like, no, people intentionally went in there and tried to censor, tried to erase us from history to fit a single perspective, which that is that heteronormative perspective that was for some there are many reasons, but for some reason it was pushed by the colonial powers that started to spread across the world during that time.
Isn't that what's happening right now here in places like Florida? The erasure of people, the telling students, you can't read these books. There's so much information, and to tell teachers that they can't speak about, who their loved ones are, and the only way that the state knew how to deal with that was to just say, we can't talk about it, and you won't talk about it, and it will go away.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the reaction. It's the same pushback that, we're just, we know it's out there, and what else can we do? But the fact is that we have, the genie's already out of the bottle.
Right.
And there are other ways of getting information, not just in a classroom. And so people will have that information.
Yeah.
And all they've done is just, infuriated other people to say, what do you mean we can't read these books? What do you mean we can't talk about these things? And why? Because they think it's going to stop this change among younger people who, you talk about it being normal and being okay. And that is why there's this panic. And that's what this is. It's panic,
Right.
On the far right, because they don't know any other way to try and stop it.
Yeah.
And history repeats itself because we can go back to Nazi Germany when there was the Sexuality Institute in Germany, which the first thing that Hitler did when he got power was he went and he destroyed every bit of research and book and the institute itself.
Yeah. Sure.
Again, pulling back historically, progress that had been made.
Yeah. They burned the books. They did a good old-fashioned book burning.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why, I always challenge people to find. I ask them, please find me an instance in history where the good people were burning books. I want to see that.
And it never works.
Never works.
What don't they understand? It never works. They've done the book burnings, and we know our history, and it's still documented.
Yeah, and you can't do that anymore with the internet. You can't. You have to destroy all these servers, and then people will still have access to the information. It's not going to happen. Yeah.
But I'm wondering also if we're currently in a place in time where we're watching history develop, LGBTQ plus history. When I think about Pete Buttigieg and the potential of him being president, if you all have thoughts about that, and where you see him.
Yeah, it's funny because of the advent of the internet and the spread of information, it does feel like queer history started in Stonewall, and that is what a lot of people focus on. It's like, oh, Stonewall, and then everything else. You have, then you have the AIDS epidemic. Then you have a lot of the protests that happened. Then you have the pride parades. Then you have, trying to change legislation. Then you have marriage equality. And then you get to where we are today, and that is a chunk that really people focus on a lot, but they're missing out on so much. And I do think that because our community mobilized and a lot of changes in history happened through traumatic events, and I do think that the AIDS pandemic, that was a trauma for our community. That was a shock to our community, and that really, I feel that pushed us out into the world where we should stop caring. And we're like, we're not going to be mistreated. We're dying. A whole generation is dying. This is not okay. Let's just go out there and be us and show ourselves authentically in the world, and come hell or high water, we're doing this. And I think because of that, we are seeing that queer history is not only happening, but it's developing every day in this country and in the West and across the world. And with more access to information that we have, being able to see what's happening across the globe, we will see more and more queer history moments happen almost yearly. And that's great.
It's history.
Yeah.
And history is ongoing, and these are each blips in history. Buttigieg is a blip, as was Matthew Shepard, unfortunately, a blip. Edie Windsor, exactly. These are, now some of these blips resonate louder than others, but that's what they all are. And history is ongoing. And I was just thinking about, well, why is Stonewall the starting point for so many people in history? And from my perspective, I think perhaps because that's when the documentation started. When journalists, when the New York Times began to cover our community. And, if you go to the Stonewall Museum here in Fort Lauderdale, and they have on the wall the pages from the New York Times of the first 3 stories of Stonewall. And the first story, the first day, was deep inside page 33 or 34. And then the next day there was another story, And then on the third day, there was a front page story. But, so it kind of makes sense. Well, they didn't talk about these things anywhere. The evening news didn't talk about LGBT, people, let alone history.
Right.
And, when the times when we were actually in the newspapers, we were called perverts.
Exactly.
It was because they rounded up a group of men in a park and they arrested them.
Yeah.
And that was our history, in terms of how our lives were documented.
Yeah.
But that changed in '69 during Stonewall.
Or in previous protests, we were just deviants causing trouble.
Yeah.
It wasn't. No one ever focused on the protest and why the protest happened. It's just, these perverts causing issues.
Because
these perverts are
that was
protesting.
the headline word.
Yes.
Perverts.
Yes.
Because you're going against the grain. You're the one standing up for the oppressed. So that's why everyone thinks that everyone that's following the law thinks it's like, well, everything's going right. Like, what do you mean? Like, there are people that are oppressed. It's like, yes, there are people oppressed that don't look like you, and their voices matter.
Yeah.
And that's what we're bringing up to more present times that's been around forever.
I think the important thing is, history is his story, someone's story, whose story is being told, how it's being told, how it's being documented.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Steve brings up a good point that Stonewall is in the books. It's been recorded, it's been researched, it was documented by journalists. But there was also one other thing. It was the first time that our community came together fully as a group to protest, to stand up. So I think it's like the perfect storm to create history,
Right.
because you have to have different elements for history to happen, and that allowed that to happen.
Right. And people came out. And, you can't demonize as easily people who you see sitting across the table.
Right.
It's easy to demonize an invisible group of people.
But it really highlights the concept that history is written by those in power, and it really speaks to the need for representation of LGBTQ plus individuals to be at the forefront and to work in numbers, to work together. But we have to move on from this topic. So the tapestry of history is rich and diverse, and understanding it is key to shaping our present. Safe Schools has one of the most dynamic video integration strategies in America to combat what we're watching in Florida. These programs are educational and entertaining for educators, students, and parents. Today's Rainbow Roundtable is just one example. Another example is our popular and fun weekly program, Tiffany Explains It All.
Welcome to Tiffany Explains It All, the ultimate destination for all things pop culture. I'm your host, Tiffany. I'm here to spill the tea, serve some sass, and keep you on the loop on the latest LGBTQ plus entertainment, anime, movies, and so much more. Every week, we'll dive into the stories that matter to you, exploring the hidden gems of the world of entertainment, and celebrating the incredible diversity and creativity of our community, from the hottest new anime releases to the fiercest queer icons and movies that make you go, "Yas, queen!" We've got you covered. So buckle up, my fabulous friends, as we embark on a glittery journey to discover, discuss, and dissect the most intriguing and captivating aspects of queer pop culture. This is Tiffany Explains It All, your one-stop shop to get the 411 on everything fabulous and fierce. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Let's get started.
So we're lucky here to have Tiffany from Tiffany Explains It All. Tiffany, you want to tell us a little bit more about your show and what it offers viewers?
Well, I think what I would like to say, or like how I like to describe it, I bring the fun in the LGBTQ plus, and talking about different subject matters that everybody in the community also enjoys. Who doesn't like watching a good movie? Our favorite TV shows that we grew up watching, and talking about right now, we're doing Queer History 101, and which we're diving into a lot of topics and different figures in history right now. And what's interesting also, I have a co-host, Eddie, with the Tea with Eddie, and how I like to describe the two of us, because we're definitely two different beings. I like to say that mine is like that fun, like very light conversational, like, hey, did you know like this random fact? It's like, I didn't know that. And with Eddie, it's like more of like that deep dive, that real like history buff. That's like, oh, you want a deeper, like detailed explanation. Well, I got you. You know.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a very colorful person, so you know, I think that also brings people into the conversation. They're like, oh, I like her makeup, or I like that fashion choice. You know.
But the real question I think viewers want to know is, Tiffany explains it all, the tea with Eddie. Which one's better?
Ooh, talk about hotspot. I'm gonna say both. Maybe I'm just biased. I think we just bring both really different aspects, and I think both of them are just as equally as important.
Yeah.
Sure. And Artemis, have you watched the Tiffany Explains It All?
I think I watched the anime video, and I loved it. And I know Harold told me we were gonna do an episode on Evangelion, so I'm waiting.
Yes, yes, we're going to do an episode of Evangelion. We are.
And how do you think Tiffany Explains It All helps LGBTQ plus youth?
It kind of like, okay, in the anime video, right, you mentioned Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
And how there are like queer bits in it. So I think it helps like queer youth like feel seen in media that they see. And like, basically that it helps you feel seen
Yes.
in popular media.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Tiffany, for joining us.
Well, thank you.